Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fialka. Today is October 7, 2022. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here today with Duane Monczewski. Is that how you pronounce it, Duane?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Well, you say it once so we get it right.
Monczewski.
Yeah, that's good because I'm Polish too, but
Yeah.
I have a little Czech in me too, and they call me Bounce because I'm one bad Czech. So where are you calling in from, Duane?
Santa Fe, New Mexico. I've actually been here for 41 years.
41 years. I've been in Venice for 42. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is.
We met in Ann Arbor. So first question is, what's the best thing for a human being?
The best thing?
Yeah.
Well, obviously love. Love comes to the forefront. Some happiness, some laughter. Those are all pretty critical things, I think, for a human being to be functioning and okay.
I love those. Love is the answer I get the most. What's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
I like visual information, even TV. Of course, the very best for me is experiencing something or a place or being in it, and that's for me. That's very visual. But I do a lot of reading, but not for information necessarily. I mean, I read the papers, and but I get overloaded pretty quickly with a lot of reading just for info. I read for pleasure, novels, whatever, that type of reading I do a lot of. But for information, a cross section of some reading, some TV, talking to people.
Just a side question, did you become a reader because your parents told you to read? They did it as an example or on your own?
They always had, Time, Life magazine, newspapers. They were not huge when I was growing up into sitting down and reading a book. I think that kind of came with school, and it was just an enjoyable thing to do. And I'm an only child. I spent a lot of time alone, and that was like a big thing for me, going to bookstores and reading even back then.
Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Information?
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting question. I think to know something about their environment and their world. You might, if I have no idea, it might go back to kind of protection and awareness. I've never thought of that before, but I think, it's helpful to know something about your environment and things that affect you.
Really good words. I love it. Thank you. So, do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
I'm sorry,
Is it more innate in us or more invented by us?
Probably some of both, but I would think, some people seem to have more curiosity innately than other people do. It's probably something that can be learned or fostered, but I would say it's probably a little of both. But I would think that there's something innate about people's makeup that makes some people more engaged in that type of thing.
Do thoughts create emotions?
first gut level thing is you like to think so, but I feel like it may be the other way around, that emotions have a big impact on what your quote thinking is. Years ago, I went to see my doctor about some, whatever. He was a special guy. We had a good bond. And I remember he drew a little diagram. It was basically a circle. And then within this circle, he drew a little tiny circle. And he said, "This is your mind, the big circle. And then the little tiny circle was your conscious mind." And for some reason, that always kind of stuck with me. And, and I think in times of emotional turmoil, that's a good insight as to kind of what motivates, at least me. It seems to control my mind when the emotions are very high.
Yeah, it's good. Fill in the blank, Duane. I don't know what I think until I.
First impression, until I play with the idea, have some kind of experiential encounter with it. I guess my feeling on that one is that when I've just used my intellectual capabilities, it usually doesn't end well. It's something that it has to be more than just what I think is going on up here. It has to be a broader base. I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah, no, it answers it well, because McLuhan says, "I don't know what I think until I say it." And Joan Didion says, "I don't know what I think until I write it."
Uh-huh.
So you were more saying, "I don't know what I think until I experience it."
Emotions, gathering information, all that kind of informs it. And, I do, I'm not afraid to change my mind.
Yeah, that's good. But again, this is a stupid question, but I know it's both and it depends. But your observations of humans in general, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
I, in general, I would say more feeling beings.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my gut. That's my gut level response there.
Very good. This is going great, Duane. Thank you so much. So, can humans think without language?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think of the visual arts. There's a million things, but you're being in the environment. I think language to me seems like almost an afterthought. I mean, there's a whole thing about, obviously, visual thinking, visual experience. And it probably goes back to, when we were hunters or gatherers or whatever we were up to back in that time. Language kind of came after, to my way of thinking. I mean, I certainly have no expertise in the area, but it seems like the experience of being someplace, being aware, all those kinds of things are pretty primary.
Yeah. Yeah. You touched on a lot of what we're going to talk about, because, we basically didn't have spoken word right off the bat. We know that humans developed it. And Chomsky said, we're hardwired to have language. But he said language is not just words, it's culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do when language breaks down? When language doesn't work, what do you do?
Well, yeah, I've kind of had this standing joke that I became involved in photography and visual art because my language skills seem to fail me consistently. And so, the visual world is a place that I go to a lot.
Yeah, that's good. Good answer, man, because we're going to get into that. So these are two questions from Alan Turing in 1950s. Is thinking a function of the soul?
My first response would be not necessarily. Uh, yeah, I'm not. I don't have a good answer for that
No,
one.
that is a good, Duane, that is a good answer. It's not, and in a lot of these, you don't have to expound on them. You can just say what you just said, because see, you get it. What I'm after is, like Allen Ginsberg said, first thought, best thought. It's not necessarily the best thought, but it's the one that popped up. So you just say it, and you're not held to it. Like when I asked, I'm not going to hold you to it. I asked my mom, could I interview you? She goes, yeah, but tomorrow I might answer all the questions differently. I goes, that's all right.
That's a good answer.
Did the second Turing question is, can machines think?
Well, I guess that defines it. It depends on how you define thinking. Obviously, there's functions and machines do a lot better than humans do. One likes to think that maybe humans have a special, link to something distinctly human. So, that's my response on that one.
Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Well, I don't think it's an either or question in a way. I think, and I think you're capable of doing both. I think in my work, it's a little more meaning, but a lot of it is emotional too. And in life, it seems like a lot of your makeup is, at least for me, happiness is one of those things I pursue in little ways every day.
Yeah, because I got it from Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. He says that happiness doesn't necessarily last, but meaning does. But again, because I put these things in, like, is it this or that, it doesn't mean it's both and neither, and it's a lot more complex. So
Right.
that's, I'm the reason I do these interviews is almost that it's me and you rethinking the questions and the wording of the questions, because it's like certain verbs. Like, I'll tell you a good example. When I'd say, is it more this or more that, this woman said, the word more doesn't function in your question.
She told you what was what there. Yeah.
I know, and I thought that was brilliant. So, I mean, here's one, because you brought up consciousness, and I love that diagram. I'm after anecdotes and stories too, like you said about your doctor drawing that diagram. So does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we creating it?
Well, once again, I would say both. With your parallel there, your description, where consciousness is kind of bubbling away. That kind of rings true to me. You get to plug into it periodically.
Yeah.
When you're on.
Because your doctor's diagram, I maybe I don't understand it, but some, like George Lakoff is a neuroscientist, he says that we operate 80% like or subconsciously. We think we're in control. So I mean, it was almost like I didn't quite understand your doctor's diagram, because he says the conscious mind, oh yeah, it is. The mind, maybe he was saying the mind is this big, and that's your and subconsciousness.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what he meant. He meant exactly what it is. That he goes along with Lakoff then, that the conscious is a small percentage, but we want to think we're 100% conscious.
We're smarter than we look. Yeah. Well, he was making that diagram analogy at a point where I had just lost my dad, and I dealt with everything I had to deal with, and came back to Santa Fe. And I had this. I had a headache that wouldn't go away for like a month and a half. So I assumed I was dying of brain cancer. And I went in and talked to him about what was going on, and he basically suggested taking some antidepressants, because he felt that emotionally this whole event had just like thrown me for a total loop, even though I didn't necessarily feel that way when I woke up in the morning. But I did feel like I had a headache. And that's where this diagram came into place. I may not have been aware of the total calamity of what went on and how I dealt with it, but it was an important thing.
Yeah. So what's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Well, in my case, I'd have to say the speed of light. It's becoming faster and faster.
Audre Lorde, the poet, said you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. And Yvonne Rainer responded, said you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest, or what tool do you gravitate towards?
In terms of what, Jerry?
Well, again, because I open up some of these questions with cute quotes, it doesn't mean you have to apply them. It's basically, I ask, the question is what new tool do you suggest? But again, it doesn't have to be new. It's just a tool. And then you can apply it to dismantling the master's house.
In terms of like unlocking consciousness or awareness?
Well, that's again how you interpret what Audre Lorde said. She was a feminist, and she was probably applying it to, you can't dismantle, masculinity and macho-ness by using their tools.
I see what you're saying.
So I mean, it's just it's wide open.
Right.
Where you want to go with it. Like, well, a lot of these questions, you can put them into the context you want.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, as I just turned 70 a couple months ago. And as I get older, I find that having and I'm not sure that's relevant, but like having a cushion of something kind of stable and a routine to some degree is helpful, just to kind of deal with the day by day. In terms of things that get me excited or kind of motivate me, I would have to say, that the work I do kind of fills that function for me.
Yeah. And you're saying, as a photographer, as a curator, or and are you still like a gallery? What do you call it? Are you like a gallery curator still? You still run a photo gallery?
No, I've been separated from that for about 10 years more, I mean, I've had galleries, I've been in galleries, but I haven't
Right.
worked at a gallery. And actually, the day I turned 60, I got my release notice. But I taught for a long time, and I still have. There's a community of people here that I relate to, and that's sort of like my people. But I haven't done that in a professional sense in a long time.
So you mean you're a photography teacher now?
No, I retired from that about, roughly probably about 7, 8 years ago, something like that. I can't swear to it, but I did that for over 20 years.
Right.
So, I'm just doing my stuff.
You mean
um,
you're just shooting photography? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You're an art photographer. You're not necessarily, you sell to magazines, or are you a photojournalist, or you're a art photographer?
Yeah, I'm kind of ambivalent about the terminology, but yeah, I mean, there's no practical function for it, so it is art photography.
Yeah.
And I tend to pursue things that are of interest. Most of my time here in Santa Fe, I've had a gallery or some kind of representation. Right now, I don't. But and there's never been a big financial component to what I do. So basically, it's kind of just what is of interest and what I want to pursue. What gets me going, and I kind of work in little series as far as that goes. Pursue something for a period of time, and when it plays out, then it plays out. But
Right. So you mean like thematics is in series. There's a
yeah,
theme.
yeah.
Yeah. Good. We'll get into that soon. But I liked, Duane, what you said is that the tool you suggest was stable routine. I mean, I'm the same age. I'm about to turn 70 in March. It is exactly what holds me together, is the stable routine. I have to take my bike ride every morning. I have to do this, do that. I mean, that's like it's helpful, as you said. A stable routine is helpful.
Yeah, I remember reading something years ago. One of these, I went through a period of time where I was reading these kind of, for lack of a better term, like artist self-help books or whatnot. But somewhere in there, and don't ask me the author, but it was talking about the function of routine in terms of art practice or studio practice. And, the downside, of course, is that things can get stale, that you don't enjoy it. Discovery is difficult. But the person made the argument, and it made sense to me, in that, in my case, when I walk out the door, or if you're a painter, you walk in the studio, whatever, that a certain level of routine is helpful because it gets you to your starting point.
Yeah.
And then once you kind of get through, what you do, what you usually do, then at that point you can go forward.
Yeah.
But you don't want to reinvent the wheel every time you pick up a paintbrush or a camera or whatever.
Yeah. It's good. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
I don't know if we have enough time for that. Uh, Worry about, well, basically, I'd have to say this, and I'm not proud of it. I've often thought it might be a good art project, but my money has always been kind of an issue up until the last few years, and things have kind of opened up for a variety of reasons. But sometimes I worry about that. It's hard to say. When I go to bed, I'm usually pretty clear and okay with going to sleep. If I wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning, Then it can be, schedules, this, that, the other thing.
Yeah.
What's the next step? What am I gonna do tomorrow? I don't know. A little petty shit,
Yeah.
basically.
No, I like that because people have answered money in the past. And I think it is something that humans, especially in America, we have that in our mind. And I'm appreciative of the fact that you're honest. You can say it. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Well, given the current state of the world, I'm kind of more nervous about old ideas that we thought were dead and buried, and coming up and making another turnaround. So yeah, I would have to say that the whole sensibility about looking backwards, or make America great again, that whole mindset is. And it's not just here, it's all over. That whole mindset is more unnerving to me than someone willing to go forward.
Yeah. Duane, can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Yeah, well, one of them, I'm not sure it's my earliest one, it probably isn't. But when I fit into a sink, so we're going back a ways. I used to get a bath in a big metal sink downstairs, and it was very nice. It was like my private pool, 'cause I was so small that I had this big sink down there. That's probably one of my earliest memories.
Beautiful. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
For me, I'd say more a blessing.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's not true for all of humanity, but I've been fortunate enough to have a pretty loving environment, and overall, I would say for me, it's more of a blessing.
Beautiful. Tell me someone just briefly within your immediate family who had an impact on you, like a role model, and what specifically was that impact? And then outside your immediate family, just briefly.
Yeah. Well, I would say my dad, for one thing, just in terms of who he was, how he operated, just a good person. And a lot of it was subconscious. I had disagreements, and teenage years were difficult. Um, and then in terms of role models outside of the family, uh, in terms of people I knew, I had an older friend, actually probably about my dad's age, here in Santa Fe, who he came from a very different background. He was retired. He was an art collector, and actually he had a lot of parallels with my dad, but we had a lot of shared interest, he and I, and he was kind of an influence as well, I would say.
Beautiful. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
Oh yeah, Polish and Mexican, so Roman Catholic all the way. But it's
Do you
interesting because my mother was more serious about it. Every Sunday we'd have a little family disagreement. She would want to go early to mass and get near the front, and my dad wanted to get out of the parking lot quickly, so he wanted he wanted to go a little later.
Duane, do you pray?
Not on a regular basis, not in a conscious way. Even though it's funny you bring that up, because I've noticed over the last couple of years, and this is totally not, I just became aware of it, but when I'm in a place where I'm sort of in tune with the environment I'm photographing and trying to concentrate, I adopt a very church-like posture. And I think I've done it forever, but I have only been aware of it the last couple of years. You know, it's kind of funny, but so that's, I guess, in a sense, a form of prayer.
That's beautiful. And so, if God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Welcome. uh,
That's good. We can go from there. Okay. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
So whether it originates with the person or if it's like, yeah, I would tend to think it's the person myself. I don't see evil as an entity,
Yeah.
even though its presence is wide. But
Yeah.
it's a lot of these questions are things I've never ever thought of. But I would say it tends to be, at least certainly the manifestation is in humans.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, the question really is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I set it up with modern thinkers. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Detroit-born Coppola says he stole from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name.
I like that one.
Yeah, and Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is how do you, Duane, deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
There's some element of truth there.
Yeah.
I would say that certainly once that acknowledgement exists, it kind of changes your makeup. So I would give them credit for that one.
So how would you advise someone to deal with an enemy, just in general?
Well, I'm thinking about a particular person I know. I would say I never want to feed them any energy whatsoever.
Yeah.
That's my response, and who knows where that comes from. But I've tried to, kill them with kindness a couple times. That certainly didn't work. And so at this point, I'm just happier we kind of don't go there.
Yeah, because Ram Dass said, I'm having a real hard time loving George Bush, or like fill in the blank. I'm having a real hard time loving Putin. Like, talk about 70. I think he turned 70 today. The dude's our age.
My bro.
Yeah, like what can we do but love him? But if you say, oh, I love Putin, people are going to think you're horrible.
If I get beat up.
Right. So James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
That's a good question. Uh, I would hope that there's something distilled and kind of a deeper truth or a truth coming through the human filter, at least in the hands of someone who's good at their craft and their mind is of interest. In the arts, it's always been curious to me how much repetition there is, and sort of meaningless activity in the sense of coming up with a new or amazing product. On the other hand, it's an activity that perhaps centers people. It probably does some good on a physical level. I'm kind of meandering here, but yeah, I've often wondered why do I have to look at another photograph of a sunset? I can look out the window and see it. There's got to be some element of the artist's mind, consciousness, something that transforms it into something different and special and unique, and something that can feed you.
It's like you're on your website, you quote Marcel Proust, how we can seek new landscapes with new eyes. So we can look at things with a new way. Like you can look out the window and see the sunset, or you can look at a photograph of a friend who shot a sunset and framed it a way you never would have framed it. So that was good, because I'm curious, Duane, just walk us through briefly. What did you study? I mean, we were at University of Michigan in Ann Arbor together. What were you pursuing? And then where's the tipping point where you said, I'm going to be a photographer? I mean, kids grow up our age, boomers, and our parents are documenting family history. So everybody's sort of a photographer, and so I mean, most people in America have that sensibility. You just always photograph stuff, so it's
Right.
like there's also professional photographers, but then everybody else is a photographer too, in a way, but they
Yes.
wouldn't claim they're a photographer. So, I mean, walk us through, like, high school, college, what are you pursuing? And then where's the tipping point where you go, I want to be a photographer. This is my vocation.
I'm not sure there was any particular, moment. It was it was kind of eliminating other things and simply gravitating towards taking pictures. When I was a kid, my dad was very much kind of the family photographer, and he took. I inherited 20 some pounds of slides at least from what he did. So that, I'm sure that was an example. I had a cousin by marriage in Detroit who was a very successful car photographer, and I spent time in his studio. Even though I kind of didn't really feel like the commercial venue was right for me, but it was interesting, opened my eyes. And then when I moved to San Francisco, I kind of hung out at the Art Institute there, and basically, I didn't come up with anything else. The thing I enjoyed doing was taking pictures. Not that I was any kind of a wonderful photographer from the get-go, but it's just an activity, a practice, whatever, that I kept coming back to. And nothing else presented itself that seemed like, oh, you should do this. I almost went to cooking school, but that didn't work out. And a lot of other things were kind of little dead ends, just to make some dough. But and then I got into graduate school and a couple of shows. And so anyway, it was kind of a gradual thing. And then when I moved here, I got a job teaching at the Los Alamos Community College, basically. And there was an active photo community here. So had people to talk to, work to look at, galleries to show at. It was kind of supportive in its own way, you know.
Right. It's the community that was important to you. So a screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. When you're shooting a photograph, what role does intention play in your creative process?
Well, I like to think a lot, but that's not always the case. Um, in terms of looking at art, I like to feel like I have some connection to what the artist was attempting to do. That doesn't always happen, but that seems like a positive to me. In terms of going out and shooting, you know, the intention can be there, the idea, rough idea can be there, but often what happens is, when you're walking to the landscape spot you want to go to, that accidents and you notice things that you didn't anticipate. So, I mean, I don't think that's really intention all the time, because once you do photograph or do your thing, there should be some clarity, I would hope, to the final product in terms of people understanding kind of what you're getting at.
Well, Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your viewer when you're shooting your photograph? Or more so when you're deciding which photograph to display?
Right,
Yeah.
right. That's a slippery slope. I think I've come to the realization that just basically I have to kind of keep me happy, because I don't really have I don't have much of an audience, and it's so amorphous in terms of trying to figure out what other people like or dislike or whatever. That I just feel like, well, was this going to really make me happy or not? And you're right about the editing. I think the editing in a lot of ways is there's more analysis and thought in that than in the actual shooting. The shooting is kind of automatic,
Yeah, people don't realize the guy might have shot 20, 40, 80, 100 photographs to get this one. They just think, wow, what a photograph. Because, when you're an amateur photographer, you shoot one and go, that was it. Great.
Yeah, I think when Gary Winogrand, street photographer from New York, when he died, he had something along the lines of 10 to 12,000 rolls of film that were undeveloped.
Undeveloped, yeah.
So,
well, what's her name? Myers in Chicago is the perfect example. She never hardly developed anything. You know that street photographer in Chicago?
Yeah, the lady that kind of rediscovered her work
Yeah.
a couple of years ago. Yeah.
So, do artists have moral obligation?
On some level, I think they do.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be overtly political work to fulfill an obligation, but I think they do.
Do artists have accessibility obligation? Are they sort of obligated to be accessible to, accessible, you know what I mean, to their potential viewer?
Yeah. The one thing I encountered both teaching and in the galleries was a sort of deep-seated, and this is not everybody, but there's a percentage of people that have a deep mistrust of art in terms of, especially when it's connected to money. what's this worth, or why is that worthy of being on a gallery wall, or that's white on white, what's the big deal there? So my gut feeling is that if you put forth your best effort, the audience will find you if they're going to. They may not, but you got to, you need to live with yourself primarily.
That's Al Flipside said, "Don't sell out, sneak in." I love
I like that very much.
But the great Michigander Paul Schrader, who grew up in Grand Rapids, and his parents wouldn't let him see movies growing up. And then he grew up and wrote Taxi Driver. It's like, you better be careful what you restrict your kid.
See what happens?
See, guess what he said? The role of the artist is to attempt to sell out, but fail. Which is,
okay.
Most people sort of like that, but it is sort of like, oh, I tried to sell out, but I'm such a great artist, I failed. It's sort of elitist in the deeper level, but on the surface level, it's interesting. So in that regard, Carl Andre, the sculptor, said sculpture as place. And I know that you're already brought up the word environment. And in a lot of ways, your photography is like observing the environment. You don't set things up. You walk down the street and shoot pictures and you observe it.
Mm-hmm.
But he said an interesting thing. Carl Andre said, photography is a lie. So we know that photography isn't, it's like the Magritte painting. This is a painting of a pipe. It's not a pipe, but you look at it, it looks like a pipe. So it's bold, and photography is a lie. The question is, on what occasion do you lie?
Well, on one level, I think that's a valid, point. People tend to think of photographs as surrogates for what's in front of the camera. And that's, in my way of thinking, that's not the case at all. You're taking three-dimensional reality, smells, light, sounds, all this stuff, and you're condensing it to a flat piece of paper where everything is frozen in time. And in that sense, it is a fabrication. So I mean, I'm not sure that's what he was getting at. But in that sense, I can understand that point. As far as lying in a, well, actually, you know what? I'll take that back. Yeah, I mean, when you go out, you do, and when you're photographing and when you're in the dark room, whatever, there's manipulations that go on. For a long time, I had a real fondness, and I still do this, for finding spatial illusions in when I'm walking around. And I often do things simply, kind of like as a collector, because I've got so many of these, and this is a good addition to that group or whatever. But in a certain sense, those photographs that I've done that have to do with fooling the eye are kind of, I guess you could call it a lie or a careful misrepresentation. Certainly intentional, but and I'm not sure that's like the best work I've done, but there's a few that I have enjoyed over the years. So
no, that's funny because Tom, this is a Marcel Proust question, by the way. On what occasion do you lie? Tom Waite says, I didn't know I needed an occasion. But this woman who dresses the stars, they go, on what occasion do you lie? She says, That's called manners.
Uh-huh.
So it is interesting, but I'm glad you put it into the context. You really got it, Duane. You put it in the context of your, like, a collector's series, Fooling the Eye, because McLuhan has a whole chapter on photography, and we have a salon on photography every year, and it's so fun because we repeat the same questions. And McLuhan says the mother is walking down the street and she's pushing her baby buggy, and the guy comes up to her baby buggy and looks at the baby and goes, "What a beautiful baby." And the mother goes, "You should see her photograph." And then so, like, the photograph is better than the real thing.
Well, that's the fashion industry and a lot of portraiture and whatnot. I mean, that's it in a nutshell.
But you brought up the dark room. Now, do you do exclusively dark room with black and white, or have you done dark room with color as well?
Yeah, I've done both. I had an opportunity to teach color back in 89, 88, something like that. And so I started doing color at that point, and I've switched off or done both at the same time ever since. Jerry, you kind of freezed up.
Okay, well, yeah, just tell me when I freeze and I'll repeat. But this is essential because Billy Wilder said black and white is more true than color. Why would someone say that? And what's your opinion of that?
Well, that's something I deal with a lot because I go back and forth or do things simultaneously. My feelings. Well, obviously, I have mixed feelings. Black and white for me is it's kind of more about the essentials. For photography is really about light on surface, to my way of thinking. And black and white, there's not a lot of places to go or hide. People react very instinctively to color. The color itself can be the medium. I personally find the color has a lot of nuance. Excuse me, Jerry. And I enjoy working that way sometimes, most of the time, actually. I think so. Anyway, it's one of those questions I go back and forth. I think any kind of really good photograph or work of art, it's got an element of truth, regardless of all the other things around it. But anyway, that's my ramblings on that one.
That was good, Duane, because you brought up deeper truth earlier in the artist intention, and you brought up the word truth there. Louis Buñuel says, "I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it." So, it is a cute quote, and people usually go, "Oh, I agree with that." But one person said, "No, that's bullshit, because if I'm going to seek the truth, it's because I want to find it."
Right.
So it made me reminded me of the cliche, the journey is more important than the destination. Then why do we have to seek a destination if the journey's more important? Why do we have to name a destination or seek it if the journey's more important?
It gets you out the door. It's good to have a goal or a deadline or any of those kinds of things, in my estimation, just to get the process moving forward. Now, the Buñuel quote, for me, it resonates because I think it touches upon fundamentalist thought. in terms of like religion or whatever, is that the people that say they have found the truth, you got to be a little leery about that. And there's a lot, if you talk about evil, I think there's been a lot of evil, and maybe not even evil, but bad work done from people that found some kind of truth for themselves and in their work, and then push that on the world as the only approach or the only way to go. So that's kind of what I picked out of that quote.
I'm glad. Thanks for going back to that. You're a good listener, Duane, because, you know, the flaneurs were the people in the 20s in Paris who like changed the world of art. And they sort of did what's called psychogeography. They wandered aimlessly without a quote, without a destination. And then they would find stuff. So, I mean, you do incorporate that, I guess, in your process, because you said sometimes I'm going to photograph a particular landscape, and on the way there I notice something else, or you know, you're an observer. So it's like I guess, you know, back to the Proust quote that you use is, in order to see new landscapes, you have to put on new eyes. You know, you got to get out of this sort of blinder thing.
Well, that's a central problem, or an ongoing concern, I guess would be a better way to say that, because it is really easy to get stuck in whatever your rut may be. And, you know, in terms of photography, people that have been able to do different things over the course of their lifetime and do them well, it's pretty rare. And I admire people that can do that. But every time you go out, or you're going to work in whatever medium you're going to work in, you have to kind of see if you can make it fresh, you know, keep it real, keep it interesting for yourself.
Yeah, because a friend of mine says the 3 T's of music are technique, theory, and taste. So it applies to photography and all art.
Mm-hmm.
Theory, you know, you figure out how to work the camera, and you know the dealings of the dark room, light. Technique is, you know, how to operate your camera and when to push the shutter down, you know.
Yeah.
You know, it's like that's technique. How does one acquire taste? Like, you know, how do you gravitate towards, you know, mentioning Duane Michaels or any of the photographers you've mentioned, and not mention, you know, how does one acquire taste?
Well, part of that, I think, is familiarizing yourself with what has gone on, and what, to some degree, what is going on. To, you know, it's like the old quote, you know, those who don't know history are bound to repeat it. So I think that's pretty important for people, regardless of what it is they're doing, to have an awareness of where, you know, the human endeavor is taking you so far. You know, what did people do 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago? What were artists up to? And if more people were more aware of that, I think we'd see a little less repetition.
Yeah.
That's my take on that.
How did you develop, what informed your framing aesthetic? So I'll set it up that, you know, John Berger, Ways of Seeing, was one of the first to start discussing the human gaze.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, Laura Melville in the 70s started talking about the female gaze.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, Nina Menkins just released a movie, Brainwashed, about the male gaze in Hollywood. And it's funny because a woman helped invent cinema with George Méliès, Alice Guy Blanchet, and she got blackballed out of cinema history. And so, you know, was she operating on the female gaze, or was she operating on the male gaze because the males were framing the paintings and the photography before her? So
Mm-hmm.
what informs you? You know, Robert Frank, he would go, well, he'd frame it like this. It's like, no, you're supposed to frame it like this,
Mm-hmm.
some sort, like, what informed or, you know, helped you develop your framing aesthetic?
Well, through first of all, Frank was a big figure for me. Um, Frank, Walker Evans, Lee Friedlander. I think by looking carefully at what they did, and they all had like slight, different takes on things. Um, you learn a lot. You learn, like you said, you don't have to frame something precisely dead on with all the lines all straight. Each one of them had things to teach you. And so, I mean, that's part of it. And probably the bigger part is learning from your own mistakes and successes. But there's there's a lot more mistakes than there are successes. But looking through contact sheets, what to print, why, all those kinds of questions come up through practice. I guess in the back of my mind, the other part of this equation is, well, and I haven't done any conscious work on this, but the quality of mind that you see evident in the artwork is usually the thing that ultimately I respond to or I don't. How are people looking? How do they handle the medium? Do they have a sense of humor? All those kinds of things kind of come into play. And I'm sort of lacking spiritually, but people that have developed awareness, and I appreciate their mindset. They don't take themselves too seriously while they are very serious. All those kinds of things play into it.
Dude, that's exactly what Frank Zappa said. He goes, I'm very serious about being not serious.
There you go. There you go.
But, McLuhan said everything we invent extends some humanness. He called it human sensorium. So knife and fork extends our teeth. Clothing extends our skin. The shutter in a camera is an extension of our eyelid. And even non-tangible, religion or philosophy might be an extension of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
What does the still camera extend for you? What humanness?
Well, it relates to how you see, but it's more than just, I mean, if you're not blind, everyone can see. You tend to take it for granted. There's something for me in still photography that is kind of a distilled thing. What's the word? Something very succinct, something to do for me and the things I like to look at and in my own work, something that relates to quiet and the state of mind and when things come together. It's kind of a parallel to just how you function in the world. I have, many thousands of negatives, and the few that I like or show repeatedly or printed well, those are kind of gifts in a way. You can go out there and with the best intentions and put in 12-hour work days and travel all over and come up with nothing. Well, I can walk around the block the next day and come up with 2 or 3 things.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm not sure that's a good response to the question, but it's something kind of distilled and I guess in a way precious, but that's not a good word. But anyway, something that is a gift to me from this practice, which results in many, many bad photographs.
Yeah. No, Duane, I think you explained it well, because I like when you said more than sight. There's another Frank Zappa song. He goes, "You don't want to see what's behind my eyes," because there's something, like it's more than sight, because it's evident. You go, what does the camera extend? Sight, the eye,
Right.
that's evident. But you brought up some great words: quietness, state of mind, distilled. You kept going to distilled. That's a good word, precious and gift. But Henri Cartier-Bresson said photography is a way of life. And it sounds like that's almost, how do you separate the art from the artist, your life from your job,
Well, especially with his way of working, where he was always had a camera handy, and he was allegedly always kind of, well, then I can understand that, especially with his subjects and how he approached them, and life is a dynamic, ongoing thing. He had the perfect little tool to work with it, and I could, it probably was very much a part of his life.
So, Dorothea Lange also said a camera is a tool for learning how to see without a camera. Which I really think is like, it reminds me of Gary Snyder, the beat poet, said that his task as a poet entails seeing the world without language, then putting that seeing into language.
I can kind of relate to that one, is for sure.
Yeah.
Well, there's a good Gary Winogrand quote, something along the lines of, "I photograph to see what things look like as a photograph." And
Yeah.
I think that's accurate in terms of my experience, and that makes sense to me.
That's a really good quote. That is super cool. Thank you for teaching me that. What do you think the motive of the cave artist was? Just your hunch.
The what of the KFQ?
The motive of the cave artist.
Okay. uh, yeah. I suspect there's probably some element of simply recording or documentary, but it went way beyond that, and probably got involved with the object he was or she was creating on the wall.
Yeah.
Because there's obvious delight in what they produced, and talk about a clean slate, Um, so it may have begun with something pragmatic, and then kind of moved on to something that went beyond, and that's why it probably still reaches people.
Amazing. Duane, what's more important, conviction or compromise?
My first gut is to say conviction, even though I lack it myself on many occasions. Compromise, I mean, because of my mindset, I kind of put that into political terms, and I shouldn't do that. But I think having some sense of conviction is critical for any kind of art practice.
T.S. Eliot said, poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
Woody Allen.
Oh my. That is a great answer, Woody.
Sad, but true. Well, going back to what you were concerned about, ask me about what you worry about.
Yeah.
It's not admirable, but one of the things I've done or gotten in the habit of doing is making like lists of figures about money. I mean,
Yeah.
I could fill many. That's why I thought it might be a good art project in some sense, simply because it's so neurotic, so repetitious, and it's just like. Anyway, sad but true. That's my big confession for today. I could fill many notebooks. I have.
But I love that Woody Allen's your inner dialogue. That's beautiful. Can you forget to die?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
George Manupelli, he started the Ann Arbor Film Festival 60 years ago. His mantra was ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas says there is no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. Stupid question, and I know it's both and it depends, but just your thoughts. Is art making more self-expression or more you're a vehicle for whatever cultures, environments, and technology is dominant?
Well, I'm on the side of the argument that the whole self-expression thing is overplayed. That's not my approach. And so, given that choice, I would go with culture and a practice. I think the whole idea of being able to learn from whatever art medium you're pursuing is pretty critical. It's not like you know everything and you're just putting it out there. It's the act of doing it and learning from that process and being open to learning and hopefully getting better, as time goes on.
Beautiful. We got about 15 more minutes, Duane. This has really been fun. I appreciate your time. The hidden question in that last one really is, can art making be egoless?
I think not, because of the way we're put together. And this is from my own experience. Even if you're consider yourself a medium for whatever influences are out there, creative process, whatever you want to call it, I think it would be a rare human being that could totally take ego out of the process. It might drive you. It might be very beneficial in terms of getting you to work and sticking with it. But I'll tell you one thing here. So, I just got this website together. I've usually had galleries and they've had stuff online, and I'm not a computer person at all. However, since I don't have any stuff online at this point, I thought having a website is good. And for photographers, it's kind of like a calling card. Yeah. So I bit the bullet, and I got a friend of mine who's pretty good with web design, and I got some other help in photographing the artwork and this and that. So I got it together. It was a few bucks. So it took a little time. And you've seen the website, it's up. So now the next question is, well, how do you kind of get it out there to some degree?
Yeah.
So probably 30 years ago plus, a friend of mine convinced me that I had to be on LinkedIn. Okay.
Right.
And this is like probably when LinkedIn was invented, more or less. Anyway, so I did, but I'd never really used it. I almost never used it. Once in a while I'd go on, or he'd send me a message. So I was technically on it, but that was the extent of it. I've never been a member of any social media, Facebook, anything like that. So anyway, I figured, well, I'm already on LinkedIn. I'll see if I can kind of use this as a tool to get the website out there a little bit. And I've always had some element of disdain for, people taking selfies and being on their Facebook 23 hours a day and all that type of thing. So anyway, I've figured out, it's pretty easy, how to get images and post them on LinkedIn. Okay. And I I guess I signed up for a couple subgroups within LinkedIn, fine art photographers, actually 2 groups called fine art photographers. I don't know if they're at war or what, but anyway, so I have been posting the last couple of months an image every couple of weeks or three weeks. And sadly, I've become habituated to checking how many likes and sees. Yeah. I'm very disappointed with myself.
Right.
I'm the same as everybody else, every other kid in mid school, but anyway, so
no, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, it is amazing. But see, you lived in a world with galleries and museums, and your bio says I'm in these museums or in these galleries, and that's the world we live in. And then there's this other world. So when you cross over, it's like you have to learn the new strategies. How did you get in the museums and galleries? You knew how to do that, but now how do you get into these new ones? It's different. So no, it was interesting what you were talking about, because it leads into this question. The years you've been doing photography, being creative, tell me one major element that stayed the same and one major element that's changed.
One major element that has and still is the same is my enjoyment of being out in the physical world, and looking for subject matter, and it's kind of like a collector or hunter or something like that. But the act of doing it, especially when you feel like you're getting something, it's a positive thing, you're having a good day, that's never really gone away. So just to repeat your question.
Yeah, that's what stayed the same. What's one major element that's changed?
Well, I wish it had changed more, but I would have to say, ever since I picked up a camera, at Michigan, and starting taking pictures, it's always kind of what's the word? A game with self-doubt, and what am I going to shoot? What am I going to do? What makes a photograph, which is kind of the critical question. All those kinds of things, I've kind of not totally, but by and large, given a lot of that up. I feel like that mindset is somewhat, not totally, out the window, and I feel a little more confident in going forward. I'm sure you're familiar with this quote, but Pablo Casals, when he was elderly, was being interviewed, and he was like in his 90s and still practicing 4 to 6 hours a day. And the journalist said, "So, Maestro, why do you still put in these long, grueling hours at your age?" And he said, "Lately, I've been beginning to notice some improvement." That's one of my favorites.
I love that. That's Sonny Rollins. same thing. He'd play a gig. I mean, this guy's one of the greatest saxophonists of all time. He'd play a gig and he'd go backstage and keep playing. And the guys in his band go, dude, we're done. He goes, I'm still trying to work it out.
There you go. There you go.
That's beautiful. So if you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
He wouldn't have listened, but I would have to say, beware of preconceptions and I think for myself, I feel like there's a lot of stuff I probably done because I had fixed notions or preconceptions about what it is to be a human, be a good human, to be an artist, all those things. And it seems to me like as you gain experience and get older, I'm still trying to shed a lot of the BS, and get down to something more real.
Yeah.
But that's, like I said, the little jerk wouldn't have listened.
Is perception reality?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Yeah.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I mean, I think it's important to hone your sense of perception for a variety of reasons, not just art reasons. But, people fail in their perceptions all the time.
Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Yeah. My brain is shutting down, Jerry.
That's right. We can move on. I have some more playful ones and we're out of here, Duane.
Okay.
Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
My wife and I are always going at it over this. I say it should come forward, and she goes behind.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's 90. You can tell her 90% of people say over, and the patent has it going over. But the people who have it going under have their reasons.
I have no idea what it is, but it's a perpetual battle.
How do you find peace of mind?
Walking, I like to be outside. I find peace of mind with my animals, actually. They've been real good teachers as far as that go. A relationship, when things are going well, it's a real blessing. But yeah, I'd have to say, oddly, the little furry creatures seem to have a very positive impact.
What kind of pets do you have, and what are their names? Like what?
Well, I got a little one-eyed Shih Tzu.
Don't you have a turtle? Didn't you have turtle pets too? Tell us about your pets. What do you have?
I got a one-eyed Shih Tzu. He's about 13 or so. He just tore his ACL, so we were undergoing some medical stuff. My wife was insistent on adopting him. This was like 10 years ago. And I liked him. He seemed fine. He had a rough start in life. he had one eye. They had to remove an eye. He was living on the street in this pretty rough town north of here. Anyway, so she really wanted to get him, and we were just getting ready to take a trip to Europe, and we had a house sitter, and it was like a bad time. But I kept calling and saying, well, has he been adopted? Thinking maybe someone else would adopt it because he was so cute. And no, I guess because he had one eye. So we were getting ready to go. They said they couldn't hold him for us. He was going to be sent to a shelter in Colorado. So I said, oh, fuck it. So I went up and got the little fellow. And on the ride back from where he was, he crawled in my lap when I was driving. Lenny was at work. And he bonded with me. He became my dog, even though she was the one who really insisted on it. So anyway, he's a real delight. And then we've had a lot of dogs over the years. And then about 6 years ago, we wanted to get a little companion for Oscar. And when Lenny was on all the websites and checking dogs out, and this dog took a really great picture, the little fuzzy black thing. And so we went out to meet the dog, and she was just sweet as can be. And we wanted to make sure Oscar and she got along. So Oscar immediately started humping her, and she was okay. Anyway, so she's been a real live wire. She's like a terrier mix of some kind. We don't know what. But she has to greet everybody and preferably kiss them. She's pretty high energy and a little high strung, but she's just the sweetest little thing, even though she can be difficult. And then we have a tortoise, Marley. He lived in town here when we moved back to the neighborhood that we originally lived in 40 years ago. And I guess his mate or whatever passed away. So they wanted to make sure that this tortoise was going to have a good environment to live in. So we have an enclosed courtyard. I don't know if you remember, but anyway, so we've had him for 11 years, and he's going to outlive us for sure. Yeah, he's got a lot of personality. In the summer, he'll scratch the front door to be let out. And then if he feels like it, he wants to come back in, he'll scratch the door to come back in. If he's hungry, he will slowly follow you all around the house and bump you until he gets fed. And then when he eats, he can eat like he can eat a whole head of romaine if he wants to.
Wow.
Anyway, so this time of year, he's low key. He goes underneath the furniture and sleeps. But that's our pet situation.
It's great. Well, Duane, it's really been fun. I got one more question. We're out of here. Thornton Wilder said in 1928, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. Normally, what I ask at the end is, you've laid your cards on the table for over 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this, but what's it really all about for you? But in researching my photography notes today, I noticed that Diane Arbus said that a photograph is a secret about a secret. The more it tells, the less you know. So I'm just wondering if you can talk about this idea of art, is this hiding and telling at the same time, this secret, you're hiding and telling at the same time. But even more so, I think both of us have been touched by Diane Arbus's photographs. Mm. They're really, I always said when I first saw them when we were in Ann Arbor together, I go, that's amazing, but I'd never have that in my house. and then I found that for 40 years, some corner of my house, I had that picture of Diane Arbus's little kid holding the grenade.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, I couldn't escape the power of it. So, I mean, just what's your take on this? A photograph is a secret about a secret. The more it tells, the less you know.
Well, you know, two things. Well, the first one is this, that I've always found photographs, excuse me, fascinating. Walker Evans' work in particular, and I think probably Diane Arbus's work as well. Also, things in the street photographic tradition, where it would be everything would be clear, sharp, visible, described beautifully. But yet you knew that there was more going on than just that.
Yeah.
It didn't rely on any contrivance or subterfuge or corny use of darkness or anything arbitrary. It was like straight ahead and yet had mystery and power.
Yeah.
And to me, even though what I admire and say and look at may be different from what I do, I've always felt like that was a kind of a worthy goal in a way, and that art that could do that, be descriptive, not underhanded, sleight of hand, anything like that, and yet be mysterious and have power. That was kind of what I was always shooting for.
Yeah.
The other thing I just wanted to say real quick was I saw that Diane Arbus show. You probably saw it too at the Detroit Art Institute. I think it was about 74, 75, 73, something like that. And it was a big show. And I was in this room. A lot of people were there. And I wandered through the show and I heard this loud screech. Ah! And it was a middle-aged lady and her husband in front of the nudist middle-aged lady and her husband sitting in the easy chair. It was a wonderful moment. Yeah, she had a strong reaction.
That's like Jonathan Swift saying, satire is a mirror in which you could see every face but your own. But that's really odd in the poet. The mystery of art is that we don't know if it activates or pacifies us. We want to think it activates us, but so we don't know which it does. And that's the beauty, that it has mystery,
Yeah. I mean, I think it can actually probably do two things. I mean, a powerful work of art that, gives you some kind of sense of peace or insight or something along those lines. There's no reason why that can't motivate you to, make change or do whatever you need to do. Something to think about.
Cool. Well, Duane, this has really been fun. I really appreciate your time. And even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever.
Sounds good, Jerry. It's great to talk to you. Thank you for doing this. Bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.